Surely the most unusual monument in America is to be found in the town of Enterprise, Coffee County, Alabama. There on the town square is a statue expressing the gratitude of the local people to the Mexican boll weevil. In 1895, the boll weevil arrived in large numbers and wiped out the year's cotton crop, the major economic basis for much of the South at the time. In desperation, the farmers searched for other crops to plant, and by 1919, the county's peanut crop yield was many times what cotton had brought at its height. In gratitude for that year of prosperity, the fountain and the monument were built. The inscription reads, "In profound appreciation of the boll weevil and what it has done as the herald of prosperity, this monument was created by the citizens of Enterprise, Coffee County, Alabama." Now, of course, at the time, few, if any, would have thought that the attack of the boll weevils would ultimately prove to be a positive thing. And yet that perspective is, in fact, the challenge of our faith. As we continue to examine bedrock passages together, passages that will provide for us an anchor in these challenging times, today I'll put forth Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. Moses has gathered the Israelites to challenge them. This is right before they will cross over the river Jordan and begin the conquest of the land. The nation had been here before and had failed in the challenge to act in faith. After 40 years of wandering while an entire generation died away, they're on the brink of success. Moses won't be leading them, but as he speaks to them, he tries to give them something they can remember, a challenge they can rise to accept. Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Now here you see God has a role. God will be with them, and he will be their power source. He'll always be there. But the people have a role as well, to act in faith and not fear as their ancestors did. And how do they do that? Well, quite simply, they're to be strong and courageous. It was true then, and it's true now. God's with us. He's not going to leave us. He's going to provide the power. We don't have to be afraid. But we do have to be strong and courageous. That's how we accept what God teaches us. I think Moses meant this to be a theme, a type of mantra. He may not have written it down, but this slogan is there to keep in mind every step of the way. With each and every person saying to themselves, I'm going to do all I can to be strong and courageous. And they were for the most part. There were moments of lapse and a lack of full completion of the project that would haunt them forever. But in the initial task, they were actually quite strong and courageous. And because of that, they accomplished a great deal. What can we accomplish when we're strong and courageous? Especially when we're severely challenged. Remember, there were walled cities and giants in the land. The people had to believe they could do this, and so do we. And when I think about this passage, I can't get past the fact that it's a pairing of two qualities. They're very similar, but they are different. Strong and courageous aren't the same. You can be one without being the other. And with our goal being self-examination, I'd like to look today at this passage from this perspective. Can you have strength without courage? Well, of course you can. We see it all the time. People who don't know what power they possess, and so they're always holding back. They're afraid to ask, afraid to act in all kinds of situations. And as Christians, we always have power, but hesitancy seems to so frequently overwhelm us. But as I thought of a biblical example to illustrate this point, I came to none other than Moses himself. When Stephen speaks before the Sanhedrin, he mentions the story of Moses and says in Acts chapter 7, verse 25, Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. Stephen is referring to Moses' killing of the Egyptian taskmaster. It appears that Moses had decided that it was time for a revolution. He would strike out at the unfairness of the Egyptians, and the Hebrews would rise up and follow him as he led them to freedom. Moses is strong as the son of Pharaoh, and his courage is immense. But it doesn't go the way Moses had planned. And he flees to the land of Midian and spends 40 years as a shepherd. And of course, we know what happens next. Moses is 80 years old when God appears to him in a burning bush and tells him that now is the time for him to lead the people out of Egypt. And we also know Moses' response. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, but Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" Now, I don't believe for a minute that Moses has lost his strength, but he has lost his courage. It won't take long at all for Moses to renew the strength that God has placed in him, but renewing Moses' courage will be a challenge. And this happens to us as well. Maybe it's been a while since you felt the power of God or witnessed an event that made his power so clearly known. And it's easy to forget. It's easy to come to believe that our time has passed and we become weary and tired and be perhaps even caught up in this idea of what might have been. God really pushes Moses to have courage. And every argument that Moses offers, God counters. The same is true for us. The power of God is in his people. When God calls us to use his power, he wants us to have the courage to rise to the opportunity and to be willing to be used as his instrument. In Psalms chapter 28, verse 14, we find, "Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." I'm reminded of that old saying. I don't know the original person who had written this, but it goes simply, "On the plains of hesitation lie the bleached bones of countless millions who at the dawn of victory sat down to rest and died resting." Don't die resting. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take heart. Wait for the Lord. What about being willing to show courage, but uncertain about the strength? Well, again, we have a character from the original story that I believe illustrates this point. After Moses challenges the people, he publicly challenges their new leader. Joshua will take the reins after the death of Moses and will lead the people in the conquest of Canaan. And so in the very next verse, Deuteronomy 31, verse 7, we find, "Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, 'Be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance.'" Now, Joshua has shown to be an effective military leader. Doubt that anyone at this point would have questioned Joshua's courage. Yet Moses knows that it's going to be challenging. When you read the first chapter of the book of Joshua, as Joshua takes over as leader, he's charged to be strong and courageous by God and by the community. And it's mentioned over and over again in Joshua chapter 1. Now, don't forget, these people have witnessed powerful things. Some could likely still remember the passing through of the Red Sea, those who were under 20 at the time that took place. There have been some battles along the way, and Joshua led in the defeat of the Amalekites. They've lived in the desert, and God has provided water, and manna has appeared miraculously every week, 6 times a week. every day except the Sabbath day. They followed a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. They have every reason to be courageous. But now things are changing. Number one, there's going to be a new leader. They could have been too focused on Moses and his leadership. That's certainly possible. Even more so, the challenge is greater now, and they are now going to actually put their lives on the line. They know they don't possess the strength, but can they put their active faith into the hands of God? So how do they get connected to God's strength? God leads them in the beginning to the biggest battle that will take place, an attack on the walled city of Jericho. And he provides for them a plan that will clarify that all they have to do is rest in the strength of God. I've often imagined what it would have been like for Joshua to present the battle plan for the capture of the city of Jericho. Okay, guys, here's the plan. We're going to get all dressed up for battle. We're going to take the ark and march around the city of Jericho. Okay, then what? Then we're going to go back home. Well, is there more? Yeah, the next day we'll do it all again. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next. We're just going to keep marching around the city once every day? No. On the seventh day, we'll march around 7 times. The priests will blow their horns, and we'll all shout. Okay, well, what happens after that? Well, the walls are going to fall down, and we capture the city. And that is just exactly the way it happened. Why did God choose that approach? Well, you have to presume that it was based on the idea that people would know where the strength came from. God destroyed Jericho, and Israel only did the finishing work. God wanted them to know that they were strong, not because they were, but because He was with them. And that's a message we need as well. Have you ever just watched while God handled a situation that was above your ability to resolve? My guess is that most, if not all of us, have had those faith-building experiences. And yet we forget, and we shrink back, and we fail to recognize and utilize the strength of the Lord, and eventually our courage shrinks. Now is a time for courage, because God is still in power. Ezra chapter 10, verse 4 says, "Rise up. This matter is in your hands. We will support you. So take courage and do it." I couldn't go away from this passage without asking, can you be too strong and courageous? I think that's possible. And I'll share with you quickly a Bible character who was. Samson. He was strong enough to kill a lion, strong enough to defeat 1,000 Philistines, strong enough to carry away the city gates of Gaza. He had the courage to challenge the Philistines, even to the point of being handed over to them as a prisoner. But he fell. Why? Well, some would say it was all Delilah's fault. But Samson made a choice. He chose to tell her the secret of his strength. In Judges chapter 16, verse 20, "Then she called, 'Samson, the Philistines are upon you.' He awoke from his sleep and thought, 'I'll go out as before and shake myself free.' But he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Lord had left him because of his disobedience." Now, I don't know what Samson was thinking. Maybe he had been so strong for so long that he came to believe that it was really all his doing. I see a lot of folks who have accomplished a lot, and they believe that it's all they're doing. And I also see folks who are afraid that God won't do what He said He would. And both of those situations are tragedies. There are plenty of people who will tell you to be strong and courageous in one form or another. And most of them believe that when you think that, you'll find within yourself the answer to what you need. But when God says to us, be strong and courageous, He is saying to us, I will give you the strength that will drive your courage. Now is the time to be strong and courageous. We need to do so ourselves, and others need to be lifted by our actions, inspired by our faith. It's a time for faith, a time when our faith can drive us to action. Next week, we'll look at a passage from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13, which says simply, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. That's a passage that serves as a bridge between strong and courageous, shared with us from Moses, and the instruction for us as New Testament Christians to be firm and steadfast. And we'll look at that together next time. I want to conclude with an analogy. Many of you have been to the bombing memorial in downtown Oklahoma City. If you haven't, you should take advantage of the opportunity. It's a beautiful, tranquil, and thought-provoking place. There are powerful feelings that emerge when you visit that space. No doubt some will say, I remember it. I won't forget. I don't need to go there. But please do. And while you're there, visit the survivor tree. You remember the survivor tree. It's an elm tree that survived the blast and became the focus of hope and growth and regeneration. But what happened to the trees of Oklahoma last October? Many were decimated by an incredible ice storm. The damage was done and the cleanup continues even now. Now that survivor tree at the bombing memorial was damaged in the ice storm. Branches had to be removed, some of them quite significant. And the tree looks different now. But it stands as a reminder not just to one tragic event, but to the storms large and small that wash over our lives. We're in a storm. But like Jesus told his disciples, don't be afraid. I am with you. You can survive. You can actually thrive. You can even get back to the place where you are strong and courageous. Would you pray with me? Dear God, we thank you for the strength that is available in you. We thank you that you have provided that. We pray that we might recognize that. We pray that we might courageously utilize the power in us that is there from you. We thank you for all you do for us. We thank you for your Son. We thank you for the leading of your Spirit. We pray all this through your precious Son.